background in working together. So what I am curious about, I guess, are a couple of things. We know that this proposal came to us by way of you and that you guys have been working together. I would like to know a little bit about how that collaboration came to be. How did you guys get started in photography, and how did you get started as a group? So Marilyn, can you let us know?
Sure. We all met in the Traverse Area Camera Club, and we came from different backgrounds, different careers, but we were all retired, and we either had a continuing or a new interest in photography. So as we went to the meetings, we sort of gravitated to each other, and we started going on shoots together. And at first that was just around the area, out for the cherry blossoms on the peninsula or lighthouses in the area. And then that sort of expanded, and we began to go on overnight trips to photograph. We've been to Beaver Island. We went to to shoot the abandoned buildings in Detroit. We went to Washington, D.C. for the Women's March. We went to downtown Chicago, Cincinnati. A couple of us went to Mexico. Everybody but me went to Cuba because my grandchildren were turning 1 that time, at that age. And then we all went to Italy. And we still continue to shoot around the area. And usually we will go to a local restaurant afterwards and talk about our art. So, and our collaboration, I think probably other people can jump in on this, but our collaboration is more from exhibiting together and working out the exhibit, the design of the exhibit, the subject matter. We kind of agreed to use the black frames and white mats and fine art paper to make it all kind of hang together. So it looks very much like, you know, an exhibit. Even if there's 4 artists, it kind of hangs together.
I will add that as a comment, as people have come into the gallery, they're really surprised, and it's created a nice conversation to see the cohesiveness with the, you know, 4 different artists, but the same frames, and it looks lovely.
Well, the first time we exhibited, I think, was Cuba. I think that was our first exhibit, and we just figured that because it was illegal to go to Cuba at the time, and because very few people have been to Cuba, that really we should show these images, that they became more than just for ourselves. And it was actually my husband, who's an architect, who said, frame them all alike, you know, and he said, then you can really design the exhibit so it all hangs together, and we stuck with that.
Oh, so there's actually a number of things I want to go to from just the little bits that you said there. But first, just a couple things about the background. So one thing that's been fun about this is this exhibit came to us as artists who are all working in the same area, but now you guys are kind of spread out, right? Mm-hmm. So can you remind us where you guys are from? Where you're based now?
Well, I'm in Cincinnati, Ohio now, but I lived in Suttons Bay for 15 years. We had a second Michigan since, well, I don't know, the 1980s. So I was a Michigander up until about just 2 or 3 years ago when we moved back to our hometown, which is Cincinnati.
And I live in Grand in the Interlaken area, and I've lived here about 15 years. Before that, I lived down by Buckley, where I raised my kids, but I was born in the Kalamazoo area. Haven't lived there for 50 years, but for
And I live in Elk Rapids, Michigan. I've lived here for 49 years. Happy to be here.
I'm from Ohio. I grew up in Ohio, and I taught in a suburb of Columbus, Ohio for 1,000 years. And then I retired up here in '02. I've been coming to Michigan to vacation since the 40s to this location. And so I've lived up here since '02. I live at the north end of Torch Lake.
So do you guys still get together in person?
Oh, before COVID, we did. Yeah, when were we together last? I can't remember before COVID.
Who can?
Well, I go to Kentucky occasionally, and I stop. I got a stay over in Cincinnati with Kathy when
Right.
when
She
I go
has
to.
a room of her own here.
I have my own room in her house.
That's correct.
Great. Okay. So you mentioned that the first time you guys came together collaboratively through an exhibit was from the Cuba shoot.
Mhm.
So that was something where you traveled together and took photographs together, right?
We did, yeah. Kathy Carpenter actually arranged that. She had gone to a seminar in Chicago and sat next to a woman who years later said, hey, would you like to meet in Cuba? Because a group of photographers are going to meet, and she and her, another fellow, knew their way around. They knew the language. They knew Havana really well. And there were people from where, Kathy? I forget now. South Africa.
California.
California. Spain.
Well, she was from Spain.
Yeah.
Mexico was from Britain and Northeast
right.
US.
So there were about 10 photographers, or maybe less, maybe it was 8. And we were there 4 or 5 days, I guess, just in mostly in Havana.
We were there almost 10 days.
Yes.
Oh, were we really? Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
We were mostly in Havana for about 7 days, and then we went into Viaja, the more rural part, and spent a few days there. So it was a fabulous trip.
But it was photographing literally from 7 o'clock in the morning till midnight every day. I mean, more or less every day, unless we were. It was every day. It was great.
So what's that like as a process then when you're out? I'm not a photographer. When you're out like shooting with a group of people, like are you guys really in a close environment at the same time? Are you talking about what you're choosing to capture? What is that like?
Where you're not in a group, first of all, everybody splits. Sometimes like 2 of us would pair up or something and walk down the street, but the other person becomes invisible, to me anyway. You're really focusing on what you're photographing, and it's not a group effort. This group would gather at night and we'd share some images and talk about where we went, and if somebody found something really interesting, then these 2 who coordinated everything would arrange for us all to go to a particular place. That happened once or twice, but you don't shoot as a group. And we don't either when we travel, don't you all agree?
Right, when we were in Italy, it was occasionally we go, oh, where is everybody? And then we kind of get back in the same area and then go our own ways again.
So when I look at the exhibit, and I look at the work collectively on a whole, I feel like I can kind of see that sense of travel in the work, right? Because it looks like in some of the images more overtly, I can see a building or something that I recognize as a certain space. Others seem like they're architectural elements that have been captured. So that's interesting that it started from that travel. I feel like I can still see it, but let's talk a little bit about the color catchers, because this was the idea that was proposed to us. It's one that you've exhibited before. I'm going to go ahead. I know it was a little clumsy before, but I am going to screen share that folder of images you shared with me again, just so I can go through everybody's together and our attendees can see that work. And as I do that, I'm just going to ask you guys to respond a little bit about why color, like, you know, yeah, why color?
Well, Kathy Carpenter remembered this the other day. We couldn't remember. We had been exhibiting, and I had just read a book about Joseph Albers, and he was a famous artist, but also art educator, and he had very specific theories about perception and specifically about how we perceive color. And we were talking about that, and the conversation led to, hey, maybe we should do an exhibit that really focuses on color as a subject, not just a colorful exhibit, but where color really is the subject matter. And then eventually we came to decide that then the images should be abstract or primarily abstract. So the color became not only the subject, but also the object of what it was we were photographing. And that's how it started. And we worked on it a long time. I don't remember how much time passed between talking about it and actually showing it.
And this is our 4th exhibit of the color catchers
Right.
show, but we change it every time. We're continually evolving and using new work, and the style, I don't want to say style, the techniques that we use in the work is changing, and as our photography evolves.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to talk for a minute about that color as subject. I think that that's what was really interesting to me when the idea came through. A lot of times I think we think of the photographer or the camera as just capturing life as it is, right? Like it's a documentation. It's a memory of how a place, you know, is, or something like that. But when we look at the work that you guys are bringing to the galleries here, maybe we're thinking about a place, but probably not, right? We're looking at what we might call the formal characteristics, the design elements. As you mentioned, you were hoping to find, you know, abstracted forms. Can you tell us a little bit about that, I guess, process of looking at an environment for those things, and then your choice as a photographer, as an artist, when you've made that capture?
I would say that my encore career was wedding photography, which I did for.
I have to pause. Marilyn, I can't hear you very well, and Zoom can't either because it doesn't jump over to you. Can you speak a little closer to your computer?
Mm-hmm. Or maybe turn your volume up.
I've got my volume up, I think, for hearing anyway. Can you hear me now?
That's better.
Okay, my encore career was wedding photography, and I did that for about 6 years until it got in the way of my retirement. But I found that in wedding photography, I just loved photographing the details. I loved doing wedding photography, but it was the details and the little interactions that caught my eye. And so I think that informs most of my photography still today. I just love finding the abstractions, the pieces, the architectural details.
Just yesterday, we had an interesting discussion because Marilyn has been working on a series called White on White. And we thought Kathy Silbernagel likes black and white, but she's going to choose gray and do gray on gray. I like green, so I'm going to go green on green. And Babs is just going to, she loves color, just loves color. So.
Right. So for me, for this exhibit, when we started talking about color catchers, I do work 80% of the time in black and white or some monotone color. And I had to really change my thinking to both photograph for color catchers or to look through photographs for color that might work with color catchers as an exhibit. But I think, I mean, everybody loves color. You love it, but and especially because I don't think the world is all that colorful. And when you see it, it's kind of a nice surprise. And if you're holding a camera, you're probably going to record that this color even exists. But for me, I have to change my thinking when I know that I'm shooting for color.
I think each project makes you see differently. Sometimes when I go out to shoot, I'll just look for something interesting, but sometimes I go out to shoot specifically for a project, or if I have a project in mind, I might look for different details that would fit a body of work that I'm working on, for instance. So, but I can be distracted by other things as I'm shooting my plan.
Almost all of my images, I didn't go out to shoot color. They come from photographs that I had taken different places. And some of those photographs are from Chicago, from Cuba, from all over. And then I, on my computer, find areas of a photograph that I find fascinating. And then I manipulate those areas of that photograph that may represent something totally different.
Mm-hmm.
I think one of the things with photography, well, just generally seeing something, we kind of see in a in a fast way, and then our experience fills in all the gaps. When you're shooting for something specific, you have to slow down your visual process and look at the details. Even when I'm not making a photograph, don't have a camera in my hand, I will notice say the sun coming in my front door and making a shadow of the hooks on the wall. And it's something that sometimes I just say, oh, that looks nice, and it's gone. And other times I might spend some time looking at it, or I might grab the camera and try to take a picture of it.
Right, and because for me, when I'm photographing, I'm seeing in black and white. I see the lights and the shadows and the lines and shapes intersecting and things, and I'm seeing, I think I see a photograph, so I'm going to try to make a photograph. But for color catchers, I did the same thing, Babs. I took things from Mexico, from Cuba, from places where they're in buildings, there's more color. There's just more color in some of these cities. And then with some of mine, I took those images, cut them into shapes, built three-dimensional things, re-photographed them again, and there's one photograph in the collection that has a little bit of all of the other photographs that are in the collection. So I was really focusing on shapes and those elements as opposed to anything, of course, that is in reality. There's very few of my images in this exhibit that have anything to do with reality. A few do, but most don't.
So Kathy, when Silbernagel, when we spoke just maybe it was yesterday or the other day, you mentioned how you actually think about photography, and forgive me if I get it wrong, photography as like drawing with light.
Well, the psychology of the art of drawing with light, because when we were talking about color catchers over the past few days, we talked about color, and everybody has an opinion about color, but you get caught up with those, oh, there are warm colors and cool colors. No, there aren't. You can make orange quite cold, and you can make blue quite warm. So there are all these theories and these thoughts about color that none of us were really experts in. And then we started talking about what is photography at all. It depends so much on your psychology. What a photograph that you take today, 2 days later, you can just have no interest in. Or 5 years later, you can think, oh my gosh, this is something I really want to work on or go back to. So your mood, to say nothing of the audience's mood who comes to see it that day, we see different things at different times. So that's why I always think about the psychology of the art of drawing with light. And I call it drawing, but I'm working on that. I'm not so sure drawing's the right word. But that's where it is today.
I think we all see color differently too, just like the taste of cilantro is different for many people. And it's based on culture and our experience that we bring to it too, and what colors are together. One color affects another color, which is really Elber's premise. And our colors change with the age too. So in the Iliad, there is never the word blue. He uses a lot of descriptive colors, but Homer never uses the word blue in there, even when describing the sky or the sea. And I think some of that probably is our eyes have developed over time, but perhaps there just wasn't a word for it. The Himba tribe in Namibia, I think is where they are from, actually has only 5 words for color, and they can see variations in green that Westerners cannot or have a hard time picking out, but they can't tell blue from green. So part of it is their culture, their experience, what was important for them to see based on where they live and how they had to survive. And I think sometimes colors are inferred as well. And there are a lot of myths about color. There's a myth about green motorcycles are bad luck, and they can't figure out where that myth came from. There's no data that supports that. Or red makes you eat more, but actually blue makes you eat more. So McDonald's got that wrong. Green covers of books didn't sell for a long time because the printing process for green just made an ugly green color, but now the inks are better, but there's still, publishers will be very wary of publishing a book with a green cover. So there's
in all those things, Babs, you talk about teaching the color wheel or what effect teaching theories of color or teaching the color wheel to students has on students, and which I think is all nonsense. I think it's ridiculous.
No, you would have children make the color wheel and it never affected how they drew or what they, it was like, and maybe later on it gives you a way to talk about color, but some of that stuff was just, as far, I thought just a waste of time.
Yeah.
And I taught elementary level most of the time, but there needed to be a much more involved exercise with color rather than, giving them a color wheel and having them color it in.
But the best thing to me about color is that we don't understand it. We don't even know where it is in the world. We think we know. We think that the apple's red. The apple's actually not red. It all has to do with the science of light reflecting and being absorbed or reflected. But I think the best thing about color is that we don't get it. It's mysterious, it's irrational, it's complicated, it changes. It was one, orange in Nepal has a completely different meaning than orange has here. So therefore, there is no meaning. And we all see different colors. We don't even see the same hue when we look at a color.
Well, I think what's really interesting to hear come out of these various comments that you guys are sharing is that a lot of it has to do with what we train ourselves and or choose to see, right? And so as we start off maybe, Babs, with that basic color wheel just to learn some vocab, if you did dig further and start playing with those relationships, those things would start to have meaning. And you start looking at the world maybe a little different, right? And so thinking about those choices and the choices that the four of you make as artists, we have a couple of questions that really about process that are coming up. So the first one I'm going to ask is, it was in our chat and so I lost it, but I know it's about processing. And we talked about that a little bit, and I even hint at it in some of the exhibition signage. So we can tell by looking at these abstracted images that you guys are making a lot of choices with each image, right? Some of it's what you photograph, some of it's how you crop it. You've already admitted that some of you are cutting and pasting and then rephotographing and all of that. Can you talk a little bit about process when it comes to digital manipulation? I think this is a topic that artists and photographers and appreciators alike are constantly curious about. Where does Photoshop take a role in this, or what other software that you use to manipulate your image?
I'd love to take a crack at this because this idea drives me crazy. When people think about the word manipulation with respect to photography, it's as if paintings and sculptures are not manipulated. Photography has been manipulated from its inception. So there's been dodging and burning and making something darker and lighter, but the camera itself manipulates. If you have an open aperture and you photograph someone walking in front of you for 10 seconds, what the image that it's going to create is ghost-like, or you'll get a wisp of something that had been in motion. The human eye never saw that. Or even if you open the aperture and very little is in focus versus close down the aperture where everything is. So the camera's manipulating even before you get anywhere near Photoshop. And I think it's, the whole thing is less about the machine, the camera, the software, whatever it is, than it is about the vision you have with any particular image. It is exactly like making a sculpture. It's exactly like making a symphony or writing music. You have an idea, you work really hard to get there. Most of the time you don't, and then you go start again or you try it again. But the word manipulation somehow has been linked to photography, I think, in a false kind of way.
Well, what if we strip the negative connotation with that word manipulation, right? What if you just say, yeah, we manipulated and that's how we get where we're going? So with that in mind, what do you guys like to use? What tools do you use? What do you do with them?
I would say if you're doing, it depends on the purpose of the image. If you're doing a record shot that is for the news, you want to be real careful of what you change. But again, the camera does not see what you might see when it takes a picture. It uses an algorithm to determine what that picture is going to look like. And almost all images can be improved with some little dodging and burning, a little exposure manipulation, a little cropping. But when you take it to, you know, depending on what the image is, if you have an image that you want to create, like some of mine, I have put two images or more, some of them are 6 images together, and done some blending modes to try to get color combinations that speak to me. And I can work on an image for an hour before something actually looks good to me. So, you know, it's a whole range, I think, depending on what you're looking to for your final product.
Well, I've used obviously Photoshop a lot in quite a few of my images. The one that I call tides, low tides, has 3D figures. I've done a background image, and then I've done 2 little buildings that, you know, are folded out of that. And we saw an example of that on our trip to Italy. So it really stuck. It was more a black and white one, but that really stuck in my mind. And then the one of Burano is used, Photoshop is used to make stripes and then stagger the stripes. So I have used it quite a bit.
Yeah, I would say it varies. I think Marilyn's right. It varies. Occasionally, I get radical with Photoshop. It for me is really very rare. I do most of my work in another software called Lightroom, and then Photoshop ends up just doing some little fine tuning at the end. And that's, you know, I don't know even how to do the things you did with, you know, I don't know what a blending mode is, for example. So I think it just varies person to person, but it certainly varies image to image.
How about you, Babs?
Well, no, I agree. When I retired up here 18 years ago, digital photography was just beginning, and there was controversy about film cameras versus digital cameras, and I've been taking pictures for a very long time. I never loved the darkroom. I never loved all those chemicals and looking at stuff in, you know, and playing with an enlarger and blah, blah, blah. And when I saw that Photoshop was there and I could do that on the computer in my basement, and I was like, this is for me. So I took classes at NMC and Photoshop, and I really like both Lightroom and Photoshop, and every image I process that I'm going to process, it goes into Lightroom and then usually into Photoshop for a few things that I don't think I can do well in Lightroom. But for me, it's the way to manipulate. I would never go back in a dark room.
Yeah, and I use the word develop instead of manipulate just because of that word, you know, has that connotation. I heard a guy lecture who knew Ansel Adams, or who met him, I think 6 to 12 months before he died. So that would be the mid-1980s, I think. And this was pre-Photoshop, but somebody invented quantum or something that was the prototype for Photoshop. And this guy showed Ansel Adams how this was going to work, how you could take things out and you could manipulate things. And he rolled his eyes and he said, oh my God, I wish I could just live 10 years longer so that I could do that. He manipulated images tremendously. He put moons in. His famous photographs that look like they're at night were taken at noon. He did tremendous manipulations to his images, but people tend to think of him as this straight photographer. I don't think there's any such thing as straight photography, whatever that means.
So we have some related questions popping up, and it's going to talk about kind of how you get started in photography. So as we know, we have some students with us. Hello, students. And they're asking about, you know, their experiences in photography class. So they're kind of wondering, when you started, did you get started like learning all of the tools specifically with your camera and really planning what you were intending to capture with that camera and then checking to see if you could get it If so, was that an important experience for you?
When I started, my husband bought a camera, and I sort of took it over, and it sort of became my hobby. And I took pictures of a lot of still lifes on my kitchen table. It was just the kind of photography that I had liked, and so I was trying to do the same kind. And then as my girls were growing up, I took a lot of people photography, and I do enjoy that as well. But then it really wasn't, and as I was self-taught, and it really wasn't until I joined the camera club that I started learning more about the techniques, I guess, of the camera.
And I started about 15 years ago and bought a fairly complicated digital camera. And I think, honestly, I spent a year or more struggling with learning the machine and then learning the software, which at the time I think was only Photoshop. I thought it was all terribly complicated, and I didn't think too much about the photographs. You would luck into some things that you liked or whatever, but in the beginning, you certainly are learning the tools. And then time passes, and now I don't even think about the tools. They're out of my mind when I'm photographing, and they're out of my mind even when I'm developing a thing. You just know what you're doing. You know what you're doing. Eventually, they disappear.
When I shot a wedding for a friend one time, and when I got the film back from the developer, they said the roll of film that was taken during the ceremony, there was no film on the roll. Well, of course, there had to be film on the roll because I had to roll it into my camera. So after that, I said, I'm never doing a wedding again. But then my daughter's best friend asked me to shoot her wedding. And so I bought a digital camera, and I thought I would use both for a while, but never went back to the, I love the digital camera. And I did take a class on wedding photography too, so that workshop, that helped.
I would recommend to students that you go to great galleries like Crooked Tree. You get so many, I get so much inspiration from, seeing the work of great photographers. It's really, really helpful.
Yeah, I agree. I would concentrate on getting a really good library of photographers, books and books and books, and look at them all the time.
I'm going to expand on that and say artists in general, right? When I look at your work, yes, it contributes to a conversation in photography, but I don't feel like it's limited to that, right? With all of the ways that you're working with form.
Mm-hmm.
No, when we travel, we do try to go to galleries and see what other artists are doing, as well as, I guess each of us online does that, or in our local travels.
And Italy was fabulous for that.
Yeah, yeah.
So still sticking with some of this technical stuff for another couple minutes. Someone is asking, what kind of cameras are good to begin when you first start getting into photography?
It makes no difference. we were laughing yesterday. Somebody was looking at a photograph I took, and my son was standing next to it, and I said, oh, what a nice photograph. And he said, oh, my mom has a really good camera. So we had to sit down and have a talk about that later. It has very little to do with the machine. And in fact, the more complicated they get, I think the more difficult it is for your vision to be in charge and drive the camera driving the bus. So the so-called better they get, the harder you have to work to understand the algorithms or whatever is going on inside those machines to control it and to get what you want. So I'd use anything. Kathy, who did those, or Babs, who did those photographs with that $25 halo, or what are those cameras called?
The
it's
Alpha Rapids,
Marianne Priest.
pinhole camera.
Yeah.
Marianne Priest, and does just wonderful stuff with a pinhole camera.
Right, and you don't even need, for that matter, you don't even need a camera. What you need is the light. You need sun or some kind of light. You need sensitized paper. And I mean, it's like getting a sunburn. Things change when you put light on it. You don't even need a camera. So I got all excited about the technology in the beginning, and now I don't think about it at all. The technology.
No, I think I agree with you, but I think once you start using a somewhat sophisticated camera, you really need to understand,
Mhm.
you need to understand aperture and shutter speed and ISO. And if you don't understand how to use those, it makes it, I mean, you could still get good photographs or you can get good images, but I think understanding how to manipulate those helps you with what the image you're gonna make.
Right, but you can do that with a very simple camera. I mean, I shoot nothing but manual, so you make those three choices.
Well, at some point in shoots, you can't do much with.
Oh, well,
but-
that's true. That's true. Oh, okay. Yeah, that's true. So a single lens single reflection is, yeah.
But you don't have to have, a full frame, blah, 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 all that
Right,
stuff.
right,
But,
right. But
but,
you do have control over those three. Totally agree.
right.
So Babs, then kind of circling back to that question that came from one of our students, which was about kind of learning those basics like of the camera tool. Do you think that's still pretty critical, regardless of how you're going to want
Yes,
to
and
create?
there are those that think you can only learn that with film, and I disagree with that. I think you can learn that with digital cameras just as well as. I mean, I know there are a number of schools that beginning photography is always with film cameras. Yeah, so I don't quite get that, but and why you need to have that huge dark room and all that stuff, but obviously that's how they think. But I think you do need to understand that, and so you need there are some very good point and shoot cameras, but I think you need to understand those the aperture of shutter speed and ISO to make a decent image.
Right.
A cell phone can make a good image, but you don't have as much choice in depth of field or all of those other choices you would have with a single lens reflex.
But these the cell phone, at least my iPhone camera, they're getting better and better.
Better.
And you can.
I think digital's in its infancy. Imagine 30 years from now what these machines are going to do. They're going to do things we're not even imagining. Maybe they'll make a cubist arrangement of the elements that's in front of the lens without, mechanically. That may happen too. There still has to be a human being controlling it and directing it, but it's all quite young.
You don't think AI will do all of that?
I hope not. But I know. That's a big
Well, I think the human is to find the image and what you want to shoot. The technology is just a way to get what you want to shoot.
right.
Well, this is fantastic. We're getting lots of questions, so I don't even get to get back to mine, but that's okay. That's fine. I can talk to you guys anytime. So someone is asking, what is your favorite aspect of your art? What is the most rewarding?
Mm. Gosh.
Traveling together.
Yeah.
Together?
For me, I love this whole thing. I love my camera, although I argue with it all the time, but I love the whole thing. But for me, it's when that print is made, because for me, it's not a photograph until it's a print. I have lots of things on the computer, but until it's on paper, for me, it's not a photograph. And when that's coming out of the printer and what you saw actually is reflected in ink on paper, and it's what it was you were after, and you got it, and somebody walks by and says, whoa, where was that? Or whoa, who is that? Or, you get that reaction from it. That's my favorite part of this whole process. And then probably the darkroom experience, where it magically appeared. Photography still is magical, and the magic happens for me when the print is made.
Anyone else want to respond to that?
I would agree. The print is, it's the final product, and actually I can print something and, set it around, and 2 days later I've decided, oh, something else needs to be done to it. I can love it in the camera, not like it when it's on the computer. People, after I have been out taking pictures, somebody will say, oh, did you get some good ones? I don't know until I see it on the big screen. Mm-hmm. And really, I don't see it until it's printed.
I agree. The same thing. see the picture and I think, oh, I love the light. I'm hoping this will be a good one, but I never know whether it's going to be that good. Or if I take 10, which of the 10 are going to be the one? And I love, you know, downloading them onto my great big iMac and seeing them on that full screen. I could do that, you know, day after day after day. I love doing that.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, editing is a part of this process that maybe if you're new to photography, you'll get to appreciate. You know, choosing yes, no, keep, toss, and you develop your own eye for doing that. But it's a very fun thing to do, and you're reliving all those things too. You're reliving all those moments, and that editing's a lot of fun.
Kathy, I remember you saying once that you looked at all of your images in black and white first, and that was important, especially for if you're really attracted by a beautiful color, to put it in black and white. You can make sure that you actually got a good composition and are not overwhelmed by the color. And
I still do that. I think color, and that I think color can be a distraction, and it can be seductive, and that it's so beautiful to look at a particular green or a particular red, but there's no photograph there. And I still do that. I look at every image in black and white. You know, most I'm going to develop in black and white, but even when I know that I'm going to develop in color, I start with it in black and white. And you make tonal changes or, you know, different dodging and burning based on what you see in the black and white. So yeah, I still do that.
We have someone who is interested in buying a film camera, and they don't have any experience in this area, but for those of you who do like to work with film, what advice do you have for tools and film?
My advice is to make sure that your digital lenses will work on the film camera that you're buying, so that you don't have to double buy lenses. And I think we all shoot with Canon. So I have a Canon film camera, and all of my digital lenses work on that film camera. And besides that, I think it just comes down to what Babs said. It's ISO, shutter speed, and aperture. I think the
where do you even get equipment for film photography now?
You can get it online. Yeah.
Traverse City to the camera club or camera shop downtown.
Yeah.
He could probably hook you up with a good film camera.
B&H in New York City is a good source for cameras.
Yeah.
Is that it? B&H? Is that their name?
B&H.
Yes, B&H.
And someone else is asking, did you ever think that you would be a professional photographer, or was this always intended to be a hobby?
No, I can't imagine being a professional photographer. I would hate every minute of it. I don't want to have to take what other people want me to take.
Okay. Oh, so maybe we need to lay out our terms here. I interpreted the question as in you already are a professional photographer, right? Because you take photographs, but you're hearing that as someone who shoots commercially. So
what I would be paid for doing work.
Maybe our students don't know.
Yeah, I think it would be hard to be a quote professional photographer where you just made art photography and exhibited it and hoped to sell your art. I mean, I suppose you know, obviously it can happen, but I think that's a hard way to go.
It's a hard way to put Cheerios in the bowl.
What?
It's a hard way to put Cheerios in the bowl.
That's right. It sure would be.
Money to buy the Cheerios, but it's the same in art or in music or in all the arts. Can be a difficult way to make money. But I would say yes. I remember being a kid and hoping someday I could hang photographs on a wall. So I would say I could imagine it. I didn't know it would ever really happen. And honestly, had we not made the trip to Cuba, I don't know that we'd be doing what we're doing today. I don't know that it would have gone in this direction.
I agree.
It was the exhibiting. It's the showing of it. There's the making of it, but the showing of it changes everything. So.
I'm just going to interject right there because my background is as a practicing artist, but then I stepped into this side of things, curating and organizing exhibitions. And I just really want to second what you said there, Kathy, because I think that we have a very meaningful experience with our own creative practice. It's really important for us, but it becomes something else entirely once you share it with somebody else. And that individual experience that people get to have with your artwork that you may not even know anything about is really fascinating. And then that opportunity for people to talk and get ideas through work is really important. So yes.
Well, I agree. I love hearing, exhibiting and then hearing people talk about the work and, and point out things to you that you didn't even think about. And you went, oh, yes, you're right. And then you begin to think about it a little differently than you had.
And you even begin to photograph differently, thinking,
Yes.
oh, is this going to be an exhibit? So for our next exhibit, we're, I'm sure we're already all making images for that already. And we're looking around and we're seeing the world differently because we know we have a certain body of work that we're going to have to create within 6 months or a year or whatever. It changes how you work also.
And I think selling an image is great, but it's not the key. It's if somebody buys an image, it tells you that somebody liked it. And that's what I want to hear. I really don't care if something sells, except that I want to know what somebody's feelings are about my images, and to get that feedback, which is hard, not being able to do an opening reception and be able to talk to people, but that's the world we're in right now. And but it's knowing what other people think and tweaking. If somebody said something to me, I have tweaked an image because of a comment that someone has given me.
We are starting to run out of time. We have 7 minutes left. I know we have more questions. So Christy, let me know if I've missed anything. This one's going to be tricky. I don't know how mobile you are, Christy, if you can showcase anything, but one attendee is asking, what is your favorite picture that you have in the gallery? So do you have a favorite piece? Does anybody have a favorite piece?
No.
I do.
Oh, that's easy. Oh, Kathy Carpenter does. Okay, great. What's your favorite piece? You got to tell Christy, and she's going to see if she can capture it. She might be on a laptop, so it might be a little hard.
I am, but I'm going to do my best.
It's the one it's the 3-dimensional one called The Low Tide.
Good. I'm glad that we're going to show that one, because I have to say that was a really pleasant surprise when I arrived in the gallery and found that piece. And I do want to do a shout out as Christy is walking, and you can kind of see the exhibit over her shoulder. This exhibit certainly is the creative output of the wonderful panelists with us today. But I want to do a shout out to Monica Stokes, our galleries associate in Traverse City. She really did the final layout and hanging of the show, and it really is beautiful. Experiencing the pieces individually is always a wonderful experience, but seeing them together is something else. Oh, so Christy, you should be right.
Are we looking at low tide or high tide?
The 3
Low tide. High tide, I'm sorry.
High tide, okay. Can you see it, Liz?
Yeah, but you should move your camera around so that we can get a better sense of that 3D component. And then show the other one that's next to it too. But yeah, that one. So Kathy, why is that your favorite?
Well, when I was making it, and I told you that that's an idea I got on our Italy trip from a real nice gallery. And but I have grandkids that are in here, and every time I was working on it, one of them would say, oh, I really like that one. Oh, I really like that one. So, and I just like the colors.
And this one too, I just wanted Christy to show that one too, because that's fun to see the accordion fold and the two side. How you took what you had been playing with these spliced stripes, right, flat, and then make it dimensional.
Well, that one is, I'm in a little group, and one of my friends said, you should look at Yaakov Agam. He's an Israeli artist, and he's quite famous for doing that type of thing. So you take the slices, and then you have to fold the paper, and yeah, and then if you look at it from this direction, it looks like one scene, and if you go over to the other side of it, then it looks like an entirely different scene. They call that kinetic art. Kind of depends on art that depends on motion. And that's the high tide one. That's the one my family really liked.
Yeah, that's really something. I love seeing that the buildings out of place merged with something else. So most of our panelists seem to be shaking their head saying no, that they don't have a favorite. And I think that's really interesting too, and makes a lot of sense, right? Because when you come in, and as Christy continues, I'll spotlight that again as she walks through the space. As you see it, you can see how, at least in my opinion, this collective is really important, right? These pieces are created in series and then selectively put together in groups. And I think that the images are different depending on whether they're on their own or whether they're in a group. What do you guys think? Any comments on that?
Yeah, we refer to that as a body of work. We had a workshop once with John Paul Caponegro, whose father was John Caponegro, very famous photographer, and I guess John Paul's a famous photographer, but he kept, this was years ago, and he emphasized working in bodies of work. So one, you know, we were joking the other day, the Mona Lisa all by itself is kind of a so what, you know, but seen in the context of the Renaissance and everything that image meant, it takes on more meaning, and images we think are the same way, and certainly photographs are the same way, that they have more meaning in bodies of work, or can, not necessarily, but can.
I don't want to ignore two little technical questions that came up, and then we'll do one more final thing to wrap us up. So one is, do you add entire filters to shots or just go in and edit things individually?
Individually.
Individually.
I've used filters, but I haven't used them in a long time.
Lightroom solved filters. I still have all my filters in a box. Lightroom, and the thing with Lightroom is that you can make those color corrections or color changes, which is what a filter might do, much more subtly than the actual filter used to do. The filter kind of was what it was. You spun it around, you know, to get different darks and lights. But in Lightroom, it's a gentler.
Right. Get that bluer sky and all that stuff.
Right. Yeah, red filter for blue sky. Right.
And the other technical question is there a universally perfect time of day or night to take photos as far as lighting and such is concerned?
Oh, sure. It's all, you know, early morning and evening are usually better light, but you can get good photographs at noon too.
If you're that dawn or dusk sort of light, the light's more diffused, so you often get effects that you cannot get at noon. But at noon, the light's not changing. It kind of is what it is. So that's sort of a nice thing too. In those early morning or late evening things, light's changing every second. So it's not only what you're photographing, but it's when you're photographing, you know, because there is only that moment during those time periods. It's a prettier light, but not necessarily a better light.
Well, we're at 10:59. I'm going to quickly let you know that if you other panelists, if you haven't had a chance to keep an eye on the chat, there's just some great compliments coming through about what a great work you've done and how beautiful the exhibit is and how you should publish a book with the pieces in this exhibit. So that's an idea of what your next project could be. But as we wrap up, I think it would be great to know what's next on the docket.
Oh, real quick, I'm on the board of the Jordan River Arts Council in East Jordan. And we have, this is kind of a different approach for us. We're going to do a exhibit called Michigan, ... in the deep heart's core. And we're now all photographing. It comes from a Yeats poem. We will publish the poem, the Lake Isle of Innisfree is the poem. And we're each doing a different aspect of that poem. And we will do it next summer in East Jordan at the Jordan River Arts Council.
Fantastic. Can't wait.
Hopefully they won't be pretty pictures of Michigan. They'll be, you know, a much more artful approach.
Well, looking at the examples that you have here, I would expect nothing else. So that's fantastic. So I know that there's a lot more that we could talk about, and we knew this time would go too fast. Please do check out the exhibit. If you can, reach out to Christy or myself. If you have questions, we can forward on to these artists. We do have contact information, I think was shared. I'm going to throw that up there. With that, I just want to say thank you, attendees, for coming out. And thank you so much to our panelists, Babs, Marilyn, Kathy, and Kathy. You guys have been fantastic to work with. So grateful to have the chance to share your work with our audiences. Thank you so much. So Christy is going to draw our winner.
I'm going to jump off. Thank you. Thanks,
Bye,
everybody.
Kathy. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
We have Tyler Robbins.
Congrats. So you won a gift card for coffee. So you're going to have to reach out to Christy or me or anybody at Crooked Tree, and we will hook you up with your gift.
If you want to save the comments, you can hit the 3 dots for saving the chat, and that will, because we've put in a few resources there. We will put this recording on our YouTube, and I'm not sure if we are live on Facebook, but
Facebook did never work for us, so we'll have to post that again later too. So you will be able to
and we'll have links on our website if you want to share this with somebody else, or you want to kind of go back and listen a little bit more.
All right, gang. Thanks, everybody. Join us.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.